Hi there, you're listening to The Brief, an Alberta Better podcast series. I'm Brittany Brander, and in this series, my co-host, Scott Crockett, and I explore Alberta's big challenges, celebrate stories of growth, innovation, and prosperity, and discover bold ideas to make life better for Albertans. On this episode, we're sharing a story of incredible innovation happening right here in Alberta's ag sector. With the world's population expected to grow by approximately 2 billion by 2050, we need to figure out how to feed more people with fewer resources. And that's where technology comes in. The Olds College Smart Farm is a living lab in central Alberta that collects data, applies research, and develops new and scalable commercial solutions to improve food production and evolve agricultural practices. Dr. Joy Agnew, the Associate Vice President of Applied Research at Olds College, joins the show to talk about the farm, what projects are currently underway, and how the solutions created at the farm can help contribute to solving the long-term challenge of feeding more people globally in a more sustainable and secure way. Well, Joy, it is so great to have you on the show. I know Scott and I have done a lot of just work in kind of egg policy and egg tech, and this is something that we're both really obsessed about. Just getting really smart about egg and food production and feeding a growing population globally. So we're going to get into all of that juicy stuff later. But we always ask this kind of first question to kind of anchor us into our conversation. Can you give us just a quick elevator pitch of who you are, what you do, and what I think is most interesting, why you do it?
For sure. Yeah. So I'm a farm kid. I'm a farm kid from Saskatchewan. I have an engineering degree, an agricultural engineering degree, and now I am the Associate Vice President of Applied Research at Olds College. So I oversee the Olds College Center for Innovation, which is really the applied research division of Olds College. And we conduct applied research to help producers, innovators, and the ag sector really better understand how technology, data, and analytics can be used to improve productivity and sustainability of food production. Personally, for me, I do this because I have a passion for agriculture. I have a passion for learning new things and constantly pushing myself to learn new concepts. And I absolutely love helping producers and ranchers better understand how technologies and complex tools can be used to help their operation. More broadly, I guess, that's my personal reason for why I'm doing what I'm doing, but more broadly, Olds College is focused on in this area because of this global grand challenge that we're all facing, which is the need to grow more food in a more sustainable way.
Yeah, 100%. And we're going to get into that. We'll talk about sustainability. We'll talk about that grand challenge. But just to start us off, what is the Smart Farm? How did it come about? What are you focusing on?
Yeah, the Smart Farm. So the Smart Farm at Olds College is basically a 3,600 acre living lab with land in central Alberta and now Saskatchewan. So the farming operation, or the farm itself, has been a part of Olds College for over a century, but in 2018, it was sort of repositioned and reimagined as, a focus asset, I guess, for technology development, validations, scaling, and learning. So it's a fully operational and functional farm that includes crop production, forage and feed production, and beef and sheep production. And being a farm at a post-secondary, we have the flexibility and ability to adopt leading edge technologies and practices for the purposes of developing, validating, assessing, demonstrating, and scaling them for broader adoption. As every farmer listening to this knows, farming is a business with razor thin margins. So producers need to have some assurance that technology or practice is going to work for them. It's going to function in our climate. It's going to be reliable and robust. It's going to work for our types of production system and generate some return on investment. So the Smart Farm is able to take on that risk, really, of working with new technologies and provide that unbiased feedback. So producers can make a decision for adoption on their farm. And at the same time, we're also helping the technology developers optimize and develop these products for use in a Western Canadian situation.
Sounds awesome. And so in my own words, would you call that maybe kind of like piloting new project or products or ideas or things like that? Is that some of the terminology you might use?
It is, yeah. So we do pilot new technologies, but a lot of the times too, we also find ourselves helping the technology developers further optimize or further develop them, right? Because there's a lot of, oh, we're at piloting stage, or we're at prototype stage, but actually once the boot hits the ground and the dirt hits the tire, so to speak, it turns out, oh, actually we're not quite there yet. We do need some more help on the development side.
Two-directional feedback. Yeah, absolutely. A quote that I love to think about with that is, in theory, there should be no difference between theory and practice, and in practice there is.
I like that.
When the boot hits the ground or the tire. Joy, you spoke a few moments ago about the grand challenge that's in front of us. So that's what I'd like to talk about a bit. At the Business Council here, we love big, grand humanity scale challenges, in part because we think that Alberta and Canada is uniquely positioned to address some of the biggest challenges facing the world. And for years now, I've been thinking about and passionate about what I think is maybe one of the biggest challenges that humanity's ever faced is we have to grow a lot more food in the next couple of decades. Projections are that we'll have 2 billion more people to feed on this earth and no more land. So could you give us a sense from your expert perspective, size that challenge for us? How big and significant is it? Especially, there's lots of producers and farmers who listen to this podcast, but there's lots of folks who aren't involved in the farming world, so they don't know how big that challenge is to grow more food. Tell us about it from your perspective.
Yeah, it's significant. And the best way that I can get my head wrapped around this, and this isn't my own number crunching, this is, I think, some analysis from, I think, the World Wildlife Foundation. Basically, we need to produce more food in the next 40 years than we have in the last 8,000 years. So let that sink in. And then on top of that, we need to achieve that while utilizing fewer resources. We need to not use more land and ideally use less land for primary ag production, cut back on synthetic fertilizer use, cut back on freshwater consumption. We have to do all that while growing more food in the next 40 years than we have in the last 8,000. It's very significant, basically. So we need to ensure the sustainability of food production beyond the next 40 years. So that's why we need to cut back, I guess, on utilization of resources.
And how optimistic are you? Can we do it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we have to, sort of. We really have to. It's definitely, it's going to be possible, but it's requiring a paradigm shift, really, right? Because the way that we grow food now has evolved over the last 100 or so years through like this industrialized approach, right? Where the easiest way to expand, the easiest way to scale and increasing food production was just to make things bigger, right? Like expand land base and automate things more, like mechanize things better, I guess, or mechanize more parts of the processes. And that sort of led us down a path where, okay, now we're always monocropping, or we're focused on chemistry-based solutions rather than biology-based solutions, because they were easier to scale quickly at the time when we needed to scale. And now I think we need to start thinking about things a little bit differently, because we need to grow more, but we need to maybe reverse that industrialized approach a little bit and revert more to nature-based approaches without risking actual quantity of food production, which is challenging, but doable. And it is being done at a smaller scale, I guess, with some leading edge farms that are really embracing this regenerative ag focus.
And I'd love to just pull that thread a little bit further, what you said about nature-based solutions, because this is something I've been hearing a little bit more talk about. And actually, the Calgary Chamber just had a big ag summit recently, and that was discussed there. So tell me what you mean by that. And as one, for instance, are you referring to, maybe the use of biologics instead of synthetic fertilizers? Is that one of the categories, or in addition to, tell me what falls into that category for you.
Yeah, so use of biologicals is definitely one of them. It's really more about, like I said, reverting from pure chemistry-based approaches to biological-based approaches. So chemistry was sort of easy to use in order to control weeds and pests and things like that. But the biological system within soil and in the soil-plant interaction is incredibly complex but powerful. And I think we need to figure out how to harness that a little bit better. It's complicated, so it's not easy to do, but it is going to be more powerful and more sustainable in the long run than just applying more and more chemistry to things. The other side of it that I mentioned was this whole concept of only ever growing one crop per growing season, because that's what it made it easier to mechanize. It made it easier to scale up big equipment to do things, with one commodity at a time. But that is you don't ever see that in nature. You don't ever see in natural areas only ever one species of a grass or a forage or whatever growing. It's always intermingling because of the synergistic benefits of having more than one species of grass or crop growing. So that's something else that I think the industry really needs to embrace and figure out how to do at scale, because it too is going to be a key part of this sustainability movement.
And so what do you see standing in our way of this grand challenge? You said we have to do it. So we've got to grow enough food to feed 2 billion more people. What are the biggest obstacles? Policy, investment, just the will to do it. What are the big obstacles that you see?
So I guess my answer to this might be a little bit biased just based on the type of work that we do at the Smart Farm and engaging with technology developers and innovators. But basically the scale of the challenge is incredibly daunting, right? Thinking about growing more food with less. And I think this has led to a flurry of uncoordinated activity related to technology development. So there is a lot of technology developers and innovators out there who quite honestly are over promising and under delivering, partly because the challenges of growing more food with less really maybe not be very well understood by them. So I would love to see a more coordinated approach to this problem definition and then problem solving, rather than a bunch of entities competing with each other to be the first to market with a new idea that doesn't actually solve any problems. And because of lack of interoperability or lack of connectivity or lack of understanding of what the problem really is, they're actually creating more problems for farmers.
Falling in love with the tech maybe a little bit more than falling in love with the problem that farmers have.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's also a huge, I guess, challenge related to jumping in with a solution before even really knowing what the problem is, because there was lots of, I guess, cross-sector integration happening, like with oil and gas when oil and gas, I guess, downturned in Alberta, there was a lot of wondering, okay, now how do we apply this expertise? How do we apply this technology? How do we apply this tool to ag? Because ag is growing and ag has all of these opportunities for growth. And so there was a lot of just like, oh, we're going to take this from the oil and gas sector, we're going to plug that into ag. It's got to work. It's got to be perfect, right? And it never worked that way, because ag is a completely different sector. It has a completely different way of operating and different types of challenges. So we couldn't just plug solutions from a different sector into ag and assume it would work.
Speaking oil and gas, ag, this grand challenge is happening, on the, I guess, a backdrop of another big challenge, which is climate change and sustainability. And so ESG has been growing in importance for business leaders and investors over the past several years. From your perspective, what is that opportunity for, ag tech to produce more food while reducing emissions, attracting some of that green investment into new technologies or new methods, and ultimately contribute to that long-term sustainability, especially as the population grows and we have to feed more people?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics ever to talk about. And I always use this as an opportunity to, first of all, remind and reiterate, I guess, anybody who's listening that farmers and ranchers are already incredible stewards of the land and the environment.
100%.
They have to be, right? They have to be, because their livelihood depends on it. Farmers are willing to take risks to adopt new practices for long-term sustainability, and that's evident, over the last 30 plus years in the broad adoption of minimum tillage practices in Western Canada. So practices like minimum tillage, and alternative grazing management and these other practices, they really have the potential to not only sequester more carbon in the soil, which is effectively removing net CO2 from the atmosphere and driving into the soil, but that also results in more food per acre production potential, because driving carbon into the soil improves overall organic matter and soil health and soil productivity, really. And because when you think about the scale of it, when you think about the number of acres or the percentage of our land base in Canada that is covered by crop and rangeland, these alternative practices have a huge potential to improve the overall carbon footprint of the country, accounting for all sectors.
What do you think that the Canadian egg industry should be communicating about that potential?
First of all, understanding it and then communicating it, yes. But I am a big believer, and I know I'm not the only one, that the ag industry really needs to do a better job of telling its story of long-term environmental stewardship and the successes to date, as well as that
Right.
potential for having this really positive impact on carbon footprint. And also dispelling myths or mistruths, as I sometimes call them, about the carbon footprint of ag, because egg-based emissions and carbon sequestration, that whole cycle is incredibly complex. And when stories or reports focus on just one small part of it, without considering the broader context or the life cycle emissions, the results are very misleading. And all of a sudden, everyone is saying, "Oh, we all have to become vegans in order to reduce emissions." Well, guess what? That's not actually the solution, because if we try to convert all of this land to be producing crops rather than beef, it's going to be a disaster. So
Right.
it's just there's a lot of misaligned messages being shared that I think that the ag sector needs to get on top of and make sure that the right information is getting out.
Well, help correct one of those right now for us. So, tell us, what do you think the message should be about sort of full life cycle? The view of, you mentioned beef production in particular. Maybe we'll hone in on that one. What's the message that you think the world should be hearing about that?
That the actual carbon footprint, when you account for the entire life cycle and you account for both the emissions and sequestration that's happening through beef production is almost net zero. Depending on how you draw the envelope and which estimates or models you're looking at, beef production is very close to net zero as it is. So these messages that cow burps and farts or whatever are ruining the planet, and 90% of emissions from ag are coming from cows is completely misleading, because you need to account for both that emission and sequestration component, as well as the fact that it's not contributing to net carbon in the atmosphere. Any kind of emissions from animals themselves when they're grazing or in a feedlot is this short carbon cycle, right? Where it's carbon that was sequestered in the soil and then used for plant biomass production, which is then consumed by the animal and released and then sequestered back in the soil. It's not like we're pulling new carbon from deep within the soil or deep within the earth and emitting it to the atmosphere. It's this short carbon. It's not new carbon being emitted into the atmosphere. So that's a huge, I guess, piece of misinformation that not everybody understands.
Even comparatively, beef grown in Alberta or Western Canada, I think, performs very competitively on a carbon basis to that from elsewhere in the world, because we're not cutting down forests and things like that to make for grazing land. And one other sort of beef related question I wanted to ask you as we shift into talking about some innovation ideas. Have you had any exposure to alternative foods or feeds for cows? I've heard, but you're the expert, that there's some exciting potential to lower even those burps and farts emissions and things like that from different feed choices. Where does that sort of research stand at the moment?
Yeah, there's lots happening, I guess. And I'm definitely not a livestock production expert. And actually, our manager of our Technology Access Center for Livestock Production would be the first one to agree with me. So yeah, and we're actually actively involved in some, feed additive trials to assess whether or not they have an impact on enteric emissions or the methane emissions from cattle during digestion of their food. It's all very interesting, and there's lots of great ideas out there. Whether they're actually effective and whether they're scalable and whether they don't negatively impact productivity of the animal or health of the animal or welfare of the animal, that all remains to be seen. But that's the reason for what we do in applied research and validation and testing.
Perfect. So let's zoom out from that one a little bit. And so we've talked a bit about the farm, but I know the farm is part of, I think, a larger concept of a Center for Innovation at the college. Can you tell us a little bit about that Center for Innovation, and maybe just cherry pick a few interesting areas for us or projects that you're working on that you think are worth the world doing, which I know is hard because
you're just giving her an impossible task.
I know if you pick project A, then project B can be bad, but no, we'll give you, we'll say like, tell us two things that
pick your favorites.
not your favorite, just any two.
Yeah, that's gonna be tough to pick, I guess. But so first of all, just to kind of provide some context, so the Center for Innovation is the research division at the college, and it's one key part of our overall smart ag ecosystem, as we call it. So the smart ag ecosystem includes our smart farm operations, obviously. It includes our academic programming focusing on agriculture and ag tech integration. It includes our knowledge transfer platform as well, like our ability to get information out into the hands of producers. And it includes our broader infrastructure as well. Our research right now is focused on broadacre, dryland, crop production, and beef and sheep production. But we have in our academic programming in our overall campus, we also have experts and training in horticulture and meat processing and brewery production. So we're covering a pretty broad range of that ag sector overall within this ecosystem. But the Center for Innovation is very much focused on broadacre, dryland crop production and beef and sheep production, because we had to focus somewhere. It was such a huge sector and huge area or opportunity, I guess, that we needed to just kind of focus on something first. That's where we're focused on. And then beyond those production areas, I guess, we're focused on technology integration and data utilization in the types of projects that we do. So some examples of the types of projects that we do, and yeah, this is a tough one to pick. One of them is a technology for sprayers. So broadacre spraying of crops. And it's basically the use of cameras and an algorithm and switches right on the sprayer itself to target weeds and spray only the weeds rather than spraying a uniform rate across the entire boom width. So the basic functionality of a sprayer really remains the same. And it's just this ag tech that allows it to be used in a completely different way, which is, reducing chemical usage for pre-seed burn off up to 96% without having any, detrimental impacts on the overall weed suppression and ultimately the yield, which is exactly what farmers need to hear about or need to understand, is that, okay, it's going to cut back on herbicide use, which is a cost savings, of course, but also more environmentally sustainable. But it's not going to be impacting their yields in any negative way. So that's the kind of testing, the type of technology that we're working with on the smart farm.
Exciting, and it makes so much sense, even just as you described that, using cameras and switches, just spray the weeds, and it makes a ton of sense, but I'm sure it's very difficult to operationalize.
I want to zoom out even just a little bit more. Every sector is going through, or I guess will go through, a digital transformation. For ag, that's looking at how we plant, harvest, grow with tech and data. It's really interesting because we're recording this around seeding season, and a lot of those kind of decisions have been locked in from what I understand. And so using that data and tech to make smarter decisions about what we're going to plant, when we're going to plant it, et cetera. So as you've built this center, or worked through the Center of Innovation, the farm, et cetera, what have you learned about kind of data technology more broadly, and how we can apply that to Alberta's ag industry? And really put some real world solutions to those big challenges.
Yeah, and I'll freely admit, and I admitted this to everybody when I started here, that I didn't have a strong background understanding of data and analytics when I first started in this role. So I was able to learn from some incredible experts in that field over the last couple of years. And basically what I'm seeing is that there is this incredible opportunity to utilize data to make in-season evidence-based management decisions, and to be more precise in the management of our land. And this is all going to be leading to that, reduced resource consumption while continuing to grow more and more food on a per acre basis. Basically, data and remote sensing and data analytics, I see within the next 5 to 10 years being able to manage fields on an almost plant by plant basis versus just managing a field as a field, because that's the best that we could do even up to today. A lot of farmers are just saying, I'm going to manage the entire field as one constant chunk of land, when there's so much variability within each couple of feet, even depending on where you are in the world, that each part of that field needs to be managed slightly differently. But until now, we've really never had the capacity or the technology or the ability to figure out how to manage that land differently. And data and digital tools are becoming, robust enough and mainstream enough that we are very, very close to being able to do that mainstream and much broader scale.
What an exciting time that'll be, hey, when we're on the mass customization for an entire field of targeting plant by plant.
Yeah.
In this conversation, we've talked a bunch about the opportunities, the emerging innovations that are happening. I want to sort of flip that and ask you about the challenges that remain unsolved. We like to think about the big challenges or even the missions that we need to accomplish to solve this big grand challenge. Where do you see, when you look at the ag industry, that there's some big challenges that we still need to figure out the answers to if we're going to accomplish this feeding 2 billion more people?
Well, and again, my answer might be a little bit biased just based on experience that we've had and conversations that we've had, but right now, the single biggest challenge that's easy to put our thumb on is lack of connectivity, like internet connectivity or cell-based connectivity across rural Alberta, which is where the majority of crops are grown. A lot of the focus has been on making sure that everybody has broadband and really great connectivity in urban centers, which makes sense from a market perspective. But when we're talking about the ability to harness the power of data and analytics to manage fields on a plant by plant basis or a zone by zone basis, we need that connectivity in rural areas. But we don't need the full meal deal. We just need some connectivity to allow the devices to talk to each other, push information up to the cloud that can then be pushed to the analytics platform. It's not like we necessarily need 5G across every single acre of Alberta. We just need some connectivity and then high-speed connectivity in certain areas to make sure that those things can be transferred and processed and utilized. So honestly, it's connectivity and the ability to interoperate, I guess, between systems that, in my opinion, are the biggest challenges right now.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic answer because, I asked you what are the big challenges in ag, and what you brought up was a not necessarily just an ag thing. It wasn't about growing food exactly. It was about technology and connectivity, actually, which I think shows how the growth that we're going to need to see in the ag sector will actually influence the growth in a whole bunch of other sectors as well. And I'll just ask you one further on that. So if that's kind of like a near-term challenge that's in front of you, and I totally agree, what's on the horizon? What's a decade or so out, or something that you can see coming that we're eventually going to have to solve?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a tough one because it seems like almost every week or every month or every new conversation we have that something is slightly different or shifts, or like, oh, maybe that's gonna be the big issue. I like right now today, I think it's this mind shift or this culture shift from the industrialized approach to ag to the more nature-based broader adoption of like nature-based practices, I guess. It's a paradigm shift. And that's not going to happen quickly. But if we haven't made progress towards that culture or paradigm shift 10 years from now, then that's probably going to be the biggest challenge or hurdle facing us 10 years from now.
Yeah, what a great point. And if we're successful, and I'm sure we will be, ag will probably look different, in terms of even the paradigm a decade from now or a couple decades from now.
So one of the things that we know that is very true about Alberta is that we are very entrepreneurial. And I know that's a huge focus of the Center for Innovation. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you are taking the work you're doing and unleashing entrepreneurship in Alberta's ag industry? And then there's also kind of this skill development side of things too. So, I know that's kind of a really big question. So, how are you unleashing entrepreneurs, and how are you training up the next, generation of producers and farmers and data analysts to really serve this paradigm shift that we're talking about?
Yeah, and really, this is our mandate. I guess this is the mandate of the Olds College Center for Innovation. As a college doing research, we are mandated to support entrepreneurs and innovators and small to medium-sized enterprises build their products, processes, and services. So everything that I've talked about today in terms of the smart farm and our research team that works with these innovators and entrepreneurs to develop their ideas is we help them with the technical side of things, right? Like we can get their prototype out in the field and we can provide them with information feedback on how to optimize it on the technical side. But we also, through Alberta Innovates and the Regional Innovation Network and a number of other partnerships and entities that we work with like SVG Thrive, we can also provide these entrepreneurs and innovators with the business readiness supports as well, or connect them to coaching to help them develop business plans, or connect with investors that can help them move to the next level. So that it's sort of like the full meal deal, right? They can come get technical support as well as the business readiness supports to really help them accelerate and move forward to a commercial reality.
And so if that's the entrepreneur side, I want to ask you sort of about the more established business side. I know that you work with a whole bunch of industry partners. I guess as a bit of a two-part question, what do you see as the role of industry in solving some of the challenges that we've come up with? And then the second part of that is that, a lot of the folks who listen to this podcast, a lot of our members are CEOs of large companies. How do you want companies to interact with you, with Olds, and with the center?
In industry is obviously a critical key partner. Everything we do at Olds College and the Center for Innovation has to be industry driven. Again, that's part of our mandate as a college doing research. We aren't necessarily here as a bunch of PhD scientists just wanting to advance our own scientific creativity. We need to be working with industry partners, answering their questions to help them develop their ideas and solve these massive problems within the ag sector. So yeah, we engage with industry. Some of them have their own R&D departments, or they're already like a long way down the path of developing their ideas. But by interacting with the smart farm and the research team here, it's much more connected to the end user, I guess, in terms of farmers and ranchers. So we want to work with the larger entities on technology development, as well as the entrepreneurs and innovators that are startup companies and need that place to actually develop. And I also love the fact that a lot of our large industry partners they listen. They're very receptive to our and trust our expertise, I guess, in that they come to us and say, this is what we want to do, or this is where we think we want to go. What do you think? And as farmers and ranchers and researchers that understand how farmers and ranchers are going to be consuming and utilizing these ideas, we say, well, actually, what about this? We think this will be a little bit more palatable or integrate a little bit easier. Is that something that you're willing to pivot and go down towards? And most often they say, yeah, no, we think that'll work well. So that's how we interact with large industry partners as well. And then it's so valuable to have that industry engagement and industry investment in what we're doing, because that just accelerates and drives our ability to secure other public funding and research grants to keep building on the infrastructure, building on the expertise that we have here to help both the startups as well as the large industry partners.
As we move to close our conversation, just a few final questions for you, Joy. If you had a magic wand and you could make anything happen, what is one thing that you would do that would really impact producers in Alberta positively?
I love this question. And again, my answer seems to change week to week. But
that's allowed. We'll have you back for new answers.
All right. So going back to my first little, I guess, elevator pitch about why I do what I do. I love helping producers understand or learn about how new technologies or complex practices might be adopted in their farm. So if I could wave my magic wand, I would want to distill every single thing that's known in every expert's hands, I guess, in every research scientist that's looked at greenhouse gas emissions from ag, or every aspect. I would love to wave my magic wand and have all of that distilled into something that's consumable and understandable by farmers and industry, because there has been like so much work and massive investment in evaluating ideas and products across Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada and all of the research universities and colleges across Canada. like you name it, somebody in Canada has looked at it or researched it, but we just might not know about it because, we're not reading every scientific journal.
Right.
So if I could wave my magic wand, it'd be that all of that key information is readily available to industry and producers.
That would be a pretty rad resource. What gets you excited about ag and Alberta's ag industry?
The sky's the limit. That's what excites me, is and the investment in ag tech and ag tech development in Alberta is making Alberta, this hotspot or this hub to go to establish new businesses, establish new companies, create jobs, and create momentum within the space. So it's incredibly exciting to be a part of it.
It completely is. And I'm just on the policy side of it, and I get really excited about ag. Final question. What is one idea or insight that you want to leave, our listeners with today?
This global grand challenge of growing more food with fewer resources and uncertain weather patterns is daunting. But to meet this challenge, we're really going to need to collectively improve efficiency and sustainability of production, processing, storage, and distribution of food. It's not all just on the primary producer's shoulders. But the use of technology and smart utilization of data will be key in helping us maximize this efficiency. And Alberta and Olds College are helping to lead the way.
This is such an exciting story. The purpose of this series is to celebrate stories of growth and innovation and prosperity. Like I said to you at the beginning, I am obsessed with this story of innovation. And so I just thank you very much for your time and speaking to Scott and myself about all this amazing work you're doing at the college and at the Center of Innovation. We get really excited about Alberta's ag industry and the opportunity for Alberta to really play not just like a role, but a big, significant, world-leading role in solving this grand challenge. So thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. And thank you so much for the invite. And thank you for being obsessed about the smart farming. And anytime you want to come visit and see it in real life, if you haven't had a chance yet, please just let us know. We'd be happy to host you.
I'm pretty sure I don't know if I can speak for Scott, but yes, 100%.
Oh, yeah. As also a Saskatchewan kid who grew up many summers on ranches more than farms, I would love to come check out the farm as well. So I look forward to seeing you there at some time soon, Joy.
Definitely. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Brief, an Alberta Better podcast series. This podcast is a production of the Business Council of Alberta, and you can learn more about us at businesscouncilab.com, and we'd love to connect with you on social media. So give us a follow at BizCouncilAB on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And if you liked this episode and want to support our message of shared prosperity for all, please be sure to head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your podcasts to subscribe, rate the show, and give us a quick review. New episodes drop every other Tuesday. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.